There are moments in life when it feels like everything has been stripped away. You look around and the relationships you counted on are fractured. The opportunities you worked for are gone. And the peace you once carried now feels like a memory. And in that space between what was and what should be, the enemy tries to convince you it's over. That God has forgotten you. That the pain is permanent. But I came to tell you today, God is not finished with you yet. What was taken did not leave you empty. It prepared you to receive what's coming. You see, the enemy doesn't attack empty vessels. He targets those who are pregnant with purpose. That heartbreak, that betrayal, that loss, it wasn't the end. It was the breaking that birthed something greater, because we serve a God who specializes in restoration. A God who says in Joel 2:25, I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. Not just replace, restore. That means when God gives it back, it's coming with interest. It's coming with healing. It's coming with power. So if you've been mourning what was lost, get up. If you've been questioning if it's too late, get ready. God's about to flip the script. He's about to take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it into a testimony. This is your comeback season. The pain had a purpose. The delay was divine. And everything that was taken, God is about to give it back. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over. When we walk through seasons of loss, it can feel like God has gone silent, like the pain we're carrying is invisible to everyone, including heaven. The enemy whispers that what's been taken will never be returned, that the time you wasted, the energy you poured out, the tears you cried, they're all gone and there's nothing left to redeem. But that's a lie, because the God we serve is not just a healer. He's a keeper. And what he keeps, he never forgets. What the enemy stole from your life has not gone unnoticed. God keeps record. He doesn't just watch the storm. He tracks what was lost in it. The years, the relationships, the identity, the confidence. You may not even realize the full weight of what you lost, but God does. And he never forgets. Sometimes we confuse God's silence with forgetfulness. Just because you don't hear movement doesn't mean heaven is still. Just because you're in a waiting season doesn't mean God is absent. He is the God who sits high and looks low. And while you were breaking under the weight of it all, he was collecting every piece, every tear, every disappointment, every setback. He saw it and he noted it. Because in the divine economy, nothing is ever truly lost. The enemy wants you to believe it's over, that there's no point in praying anymore, that the brokenness is your new normal. But the truth is, God is storing up what was stolen, preparing to return it in a way that exceeds your understanding. He never forgets. Think about Job, a man who had it all, and in what seemed like a single moment, everything was taken. His family, his wealth, his health, gone. It looked like a tragedy, like God had forgotten him, but behind the scenes, there was a conversation happening in heaven. A hedge had been lifted, yes, but not without divine permission. And in the end, God restored Job not to where he was, but to double what he had before. Because when God restores, he doesn't do it small. He does it with a signature. That's how you know it was him. He gives back in a way that silences the enemy and shocks everyone who watched you lose it all. Job didn't have to chase revenge. He didn't have to manipulate his way back. He just stayed in position, even while covered in boils, even while sitting in ashes, even while grieving. And God never forgot. There are people who walked away from you thinking they got the better end of the deal. They thought they broke you, thought they ruined your name, thought they took something from you that you'd never recover from. But God keeps record. He saw what they did in secret. He heard the conversations behind closed doors. He knows the motives that were hidden behind smiles and half-hearted apologies. And while you were losing sleep, crying into your pillow, trying to figure out where it all went wrong, God was taking note. Not because he's petty, but because he's just. because he knows how to vindicate without you ever lifting a finger. He knows how to bring justice in ways you never imagined. The tables don't just turn with God, they flip. You might be looking at your life right now wondering, how did I end up here? You started strong. You were full of dreams, vision, passion, and somewhere along the way, life happened. People disappointed you. Opportunities slipped through your hands. You trusted the wrong voices. You made mistakes. And now it feels like you're standing in the rubble of what was supposed to be. But here's the truth. God never forgot the original blueprint. He still remembers the woman or man he called, even if you don't. He still remembers the promise he spoke over your life, even if it's been buried under shame and confusion. And he still remembers what the enemy tried to take. Sometimes God allows us to lose certain things so that we can recognize who he is as the restorer. If we never experience lack, we wouldn't understand the beauty of restoration. If we never walked through heartbreak, we wouldn't understand the depth of healing. And if we never lost anything, we'd think it was our own strength that sustained us. But when you've walked through the valley, when you've cried tears nobody else saw, when you felt like your soul was unraveling, that's when you realize you don't just need a miracle, you need God. And it's in those moments that his memory becomes your hope. Because if he never forgets, then you're never truly lost. There's something powerful about knowing your pain didn't go unnoticed, that the betrayal wasn't overlooked, that the years the enemy tried to waste, God was counting every single one of them. And what's even more powerful is knowing that God doesn't just remember what was taken, he remembers why. He knows the assignment on your life. He knows the warfare that was launched against you wasn't random, it was strategic. It was meant to silence your voice, to crush your confidence, to cancel your calling. But because he knows the why, he also knows exactly how to bring you back, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be. You don't serve a forgetful God, you serve a faithful one, a God who saw what they did, who knows what it cost you to keep going, who watched you smile through storms and worship through wounds. And he's already made up his mind about you. You don't have to beg for what was yours. You don't have to chase what left. You don't even have to prove anything to anyone. Because when God remembers, he restores. Not because you earned it, but because he's good. Because he's holy. Because he's your father. And even though time has passed and you feel like maybe too much has been lost, God operates outside of time. What feels like delay to you is divine timing to him. And he knows exactly when and how to return what was stolen. But here's the thing, when he gives it back, it won't look the same. It'll be stronger, healed, anointed, refined. Because God doesn't just return what was taken, he makes it better. And the best part, the enemy can't touch it this time, because what God seals, no man can sabotage. What God remembers, no devil can erase. There are seasons in life where what you lose feels greater than what you have left. You look around and can't recognize your own story. You once stood full of faith, full of expectation, full of excitement about where God was taking you, but then it happened. The sudden shift, the betrayal, the silence, the loss that knocked the breath out of you, and everything changed. What was supposed to be a promise became a question mark. What was once a sure thing now feels like a distant memory. But what you have to understand is that loss in the kingdom is never final. Because with God, what looks like subtraction is often a setup for a supernatural recovery. What felt like the end was actually the beginning of something divine. You see, God does his best work in empty places. He doesn't shy away from brokenness. He builds with it. That's why the enemy attacks you so hard after you've taken a loss. He knows what's coming next. He knows that the last blow you took didn't break you, it positioned you. The shaking wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal the foundation. And though it may not feel like it right now, you are standing on something stronger than what you lost. You are standing on the grace of a God who restores, a God who revives, a God who returns more than what was taken. But in order for recovery to happen, loss had to show up first. Sometimes the divine process includes disruption. In the Word of God, we often see recovery hidden in unlikely places. Think about David at Ziklag. He came back from battle to find everything gone. His home burned, his family taken, his men ready to turn on him. The situation looked hopeless, but instead of collapsing under the weight of grief, David inquired of God, "Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?" And God answered him with a divine yes. "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them and without fail recover all." That's the kind of recovery God is preparing. Not a partial blessing, not a halfway miracle, all. But notice, before the recovery, there was devastation. Before the miracle, there was a moment of mourning. The enemy thought that loss would leave you so broken you'd never dream again. He thought that stripping you of your stability would cause you to settle for a life beneath your calling. He thought that heartbreak would harden your heart toward God. But what the enemy didn't count on was that even in the ashes, you'd find a way to praise. Even in the darkness, you'd whisper a prayer. Even in the confusion, you'd still press into God. And because of that, because of your endurance, your obedience, your refusal to let go, God is about to release a recovery so profound, even you will be amazed at what's possible after pain. When God prepares a comeback, He doesn't consult your current condition. He doesn't look at your bank account, your resume, your broken relationships, or your mistakes. He looks at your purpose. And if He's not finished with your assignment, He'll allow a loss that leads to a reset. It might feel like things are falling apart, but in reality, they're falling into place. Some things had to break off. Some people had to walk away. Some doors had to close. Not to destroy you, but to deliver you. Deliver you from comfort, from compromise, from connections that couldn't carry the weight of your next level. Your loss wasn't random. It was strategic. Sometimes God allows what's in your hand to be taken so He can release what's in His. You've been holding on to what you thought was the plan, trying to make it work, trying to force what expired to still produce fruit. But God is too good to let you stay stuck in survival mode when He created you for overflow. He will strip it if He has to. He will allow you to walk through a season of confusion if it leads to clarity. Because once you see that your loss didn't kill you, you'll start walking like someone who's ready for recovery. You'll stop begging for what left and start praising for what's coming. And let's be real, some of us wouldn't have moved unless something was taken. We would have stayed in relationships that were draining us, jobs that were suffocating us, mindsets that were limiting us. But loss has a way of waking up your discernment. It has a way of purifying your motives and refocusing your attention. You start praying differently, worshiping deeper, listening more closely. You stop depending on people and start depending on God. That's the beauty in the breakdown. It brings you back to the one who never fails. And when He rebuilds you, He doesn't just give you back what you lost. He gives you back what you didn't even know you were missing. Your supernatural recovery is not based on your perfection. It's based on your position. If you've been standing, even with tears in your eyes, even with questions in your heart, even with uncertainty about what's next, you're in position. If you've been praising while waiting, forgiving while hurting, believing while bleeding, you're in position. The enemy wants you to believe that it's too late, that you missed it, that nothing good can come from the mess. But the devil is a liar, because your Redeemer lives, and He doesn't just restore stuff. He restores joy. He restores purpose. He restores you. Some of the most powerful recoveries happen in silence. Nobody sees it coming. Nobody understands how you're still standing. Nobody gets how you went through hell and came back with peace. That's how God does it. Quietly, suddenly, and fully. He'll prepare a table for you in the presence of those who doubted your destiny. He'll cause the very place of your pain to become the platform for your purpose. But before he brings you back to the surface, he digs deep. Because what he's building this time won't break. What he's giving you this time won't be stolen. What he's about to release will not be taken lightly. It will carry the weight of glory. Recovery isn't about returning to how things were. It's about stepping into how things were always meant to be. It's not about getting back to normal. It's about stepping into supernatural. And that's what God is doing in this season. He's not trying to patch up the old version of you. He's birthing something brand new. Your pain made room for it. Your losses cleared the way. The wilderness season stripped you down, but it also set you up. Because now what's coming isn't built on your strength, it's built on your surrender. What's coming won't be manufactured by you, it will be delivered by God. And when it comes, it'll make sense. The nights you cried, the prayers you whispered, the seasons you barely survived, they'll all make sense. Because the enemy thought it was over, but heaven knew it was just beginning. What you lost was real, but what's coming is divine. There's something sacred about loss. It has a way of stripping us down to our bare soul. It exposes what we trust in, what we've been leaning on, what we thought was secure. But hidden in every loss is not just pain. There is a revelation waiting to be discovered. And this is the part the enemy never wants you to realize, that your restoration isn't just about what you get back. It's about what you see differently. Because when God begins to restore, he doesn't just hand you new blessings. He opens your eyes. What once looked like devastation now becomes divine redirection. What once felt like abandonment now reveals itself as protection. Restoration always comes with revelation, because God is not trying to return you to the same place. He's trying to grow you into someone new. When God begins to rebuild your life, he starts with your vision, not your physical sight, but your spiritual clarity. That's why before the restoration shows up in your hands, it shows up in your spirit. He reveals what was really happening behind the scenes. He helps you discern the true nature of people, of seasons, of decisions. You stop blaming yourself for things you didn't understand at the time. You begin to see that some of the losses were really answers to prayers you forgot you prayed. You gain wisdom that pain alone couldn't teach. Because pain without revelation just wounds, but pain with revelation transforms. And God is too intentional to let you go through suffering without extracting something sacred from it. Think about the blind man in John 9. The disciples asked, who sins, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? But Jesus responded, neither. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. That man's restoration was tied to a revelation, not just that he could see, but that God had been present the whole time, even in the dark. When Jesus healed him, it wasn't just about opening his eyes. It was about shifting everyone's understanding of how God moves. And when God brings restoration to your life, it changes the narrative, not just for you, but for everyone watching. They saw the pain. They heard the silence. But when the revelation breaks through, it testifies that there was always purpose in the process. The truth is, some of us didn't know who God truly was until we lost everything. We knew church, we knew scriptures, we knew how to look like we had it all together. But when the storm came and nothing familiar was left standing, we were forced to lean on him in a way we never had before. And it was in that raw, exposed place that we discovered he is more than enough. that he is our provider, our protector, our anchor. Restoration teaches you who God is, not just by what he gives, but by what he reveals in the waiting. The waiting becomes holy. The silence becomes sacred, because in those moments you begin to hear God in ways you never did before. Restoration also brings revelation of yourself. You begin to see the strength you didn't know you had. You realize you survived what you once thought would kill you. You recognize that you were not as fragile as you believed. God begins to show you the endurance, the grace, the resilience he planted in you all along. The loss didn't just hurt, it uncovered you. It peeled back the layers of fear, pride, insecurity, and people-pleasing that were keeping you from fully walking in your purpose. And as he restores, he doesn't rebuild the mask, he rebuilds you, the real you, the called you, the anointed you, the version of you who has seen pain up close and still chose to believe. There's also a revelation that comes through. Who didn't make it to your recovery season? There are people who were attached to your last level who can't go with you to the next. And while it hurt when they left, the revelation is this: their presence was seasonal, but your purpose is eternal. God will often remove what you're trying to hold on to if it's interfering with the clarity he's trying to give you. Some connections were draining your discernment. Some relationships were distracting your focus. And you wouldn't have seen it unless God allowed the separation. But now that you see clearly, you move differently. You guard your peace. You protect your oil. You value your time, because once God reveals what's real, you can't go back to pretending. Restoration shifts your priorities. What you once chased, you no longer crave. What you once tolerated, you now reject. What you once feared, you now confront. Because revelation doesn't just change your view, it changes your values. You stop wasting time trying to make sense of betrayal. You stop rehearsing the rejection. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who were never assigned to understand you. You realize that God's restoration came with instructions. Don't return to Egypt. Don't go back to what broke you. Don't revisit the places where your identity was questioned. Revelation is your roadmap out of cycles, out of trauma, out of spiritual amnesia. It reminds you of who you are and who you've always been in God's eyes. And when you carry revelation into your restoration, you're no longer impressed by appearances. You're not chasing validation or clout or approval. You know what it costs to rebuild your peace. You know the nights you cried when no one called. You know the inner healing it took just to show up whole. So you don't entertain what doesn't align with your healing. You don't settle for what's shiny but shallow, because revelation gives you roots. It anchors you. It helps you recognize what's fruitful and what's just flashy. And in a world obsessed with image, that kind of insight is priceless. God is doing more than giving you back what was taken. He's giving you back the lens you lost. The ability to see life, yourself, and his promises through eyes of faith. Before the loss, you believed based on what you saw, but now you believe based on what you know. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains. That's the kind of vision that sees purpose in pain, beauty in brokenness, and glory in grief. That's the revelation that shifts atmospheres. Because once you see, you can't unsee. Once you know God as restorer, you walk differently. You speak with authority. You pray with boldness. You carry yourself with holy confidence, not arrogance, but an awareness that you are never forsaken, never forgotten, never too far from a comeback. And the most powerful revelation that comes with restoration is that you were never really alone. God was there in every loss, in every low point, in every lonely night. He was there when you didn't feel him. He was there when you didn't hear him. He was there when you thought he left like everyone else, but he stayed, he kept you, he covered you. And now that he's restoring you, he's revealing that his presence wasn't based on your perfection. It was rooted in his love. There's a divine principle woven all throughout Scripture that God never gives you back exactly what was taken. He doesn't operate in the economy of simple replacements. When God restores, he increases. When he brings something back, it returns multiplied, because God is not trying to just patch up your past. He's preparing you for something greater than what you lost. What's coming is not just compensation, it's elevation. It's not just the return of what was stolen, it's the arrival of what was always promised. That means when things are taken from your life, when relationships walk away, when opportunities close, when peace feels distant, it's not the final chapter, it's the turning of a page that leads to something greater than what was taken. We serve a God who does exceedingly and abundantly above all we can ask or think. That means even when your prayers are about recovery, his response is about expansion. You might be asking God to just give you back what you had, but he's preparing to give you more than you ever imagined. The enemy wants to keep your focus stuck on what left, but heaven is already aligning what's next. Because in the kingdom, restoration is never about returning to the past. It's about being launched into destiny. What's coming is greater in purpose, in power, in impact, in clarity, in joy, in peace. And yes, it's going to make sense of everything that didn't. Consider Joseph. He was stripped of his coat, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and left in prison. Everything he once had, his family, his freedom, his dignity was taken. But God had already gone before him. What looked like a setback was actually a setup, because in due time, Joseph was elevated to a position that no one could have seen coming. He didn't just recover his identity. He stepped into a role that saved an entire nation. What God gave him was so much greater than what had been taken. He didn't just get his brothers back. He got reconciliation. He didn't just get out of prison. He got promotion. What was meant for evil, God used for good. Sometimes the pain of what we lost blinds us from seeing the promise of what's coming. We get so wrapped up in the hurt, the betrayal, the emptiness that we forget who we serve. We forget that God is a multiplier, that 5 loaves and 2 fish become a feast in his hands, that dust becomes man, that graves become gardens. He doesn't return things in the same condition they left. He transforms them. He refines them. And when he brings them back, they're dripping in glory. That's why the enemy tries to break your hope. Because if you ever truly believed what was coming, you'd stop mourning and start moving. You'd stop looking behind and start leaning into your future. Greater doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes greater isn't louder, it's deeper. Sometimes greater isn't public, it's personal. It's peace of mind when you used to live in chaos. It's discernment when you used to live in confusion. It's knowing who you are when you used to let others define you. It's emotional maturity, spiritual authority, and divine alignment. God doesn't just want to give you back what you lost. He wants to grow you into someone who can handle what's next. Because when what's coming is greater, the version of you that went through the loss can't always be the same version that steps into the gain. So he develops you in the meantime. He shapes your character, deepens your trust, and strengthens your faith. The waiting season is where greater is formed, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. When nobody's applauding, when nobody's checking in, when you feel like God is taking too long, that's where the stretching happens. That's where the roots grow deep. Because when greater comes, you won't have time to be getting ready. You'll already have been prepared. God doesn't rush greatness. He doesn't microwave destiny. He takes his time because what he's building in you is meant to last. You may have cried in the last season, but you're going to build in this one. You may have suffered in silence, but you're going to thrive in public. Because when God says greater, he means it holistically, not just outside, but inside. Sometimes God will let you lose something that wasn't even meant to stay just to make room for something that carries your real inheritance. You were praying to keep what was temporary, but God had to break your grip to give you what was eternal. You didn't know that what you were holding on to was beneath what he had in store. And now that your hands are empty, they're finally ready to receive. That's why the enemy wanted you bitter. That's why he wanted you distracted. Because he knew that if you kept believing, if you kept worshiping, if you kept sowing, your harvest was going to show up greater. Not because you earned it. Think about Naomi. She returned to Bethlehem empty. She lost her husband, her sons, her hope. But what she didn't realize was that Ruth, the one who clung to her, carried the seed of restoration. And through Ruth came Boaz. And through Boaz came a lineage that would lead to David and eventually Jesus. Naomi left full and came back empty. But she didn't know she was walking into generational greatness. Sometimes we think the story is over because of how it feels. But feelings are not facts in the kingdom. Faith is the evidence. And God is not obligated to explain how he's going to do it. He just asks you to believe that what's coming is greater than what was taken. And even when you feel like you've missed your moment, like too much time has passed, like your story can't be repaired, God says, I can restore the years, not just the things, not just the opportunities, the years, the seasons you feel you wasted, the time you spent crying, the years you were lost in confusion. He redeems the time. And when he does, it's not a replay, it's a resurrection. He gives you back time by accelerating your purpose, by opening doors that should have taken years, by giving you favor that's not fair, by placing you in rooms you weren't qualified for. That's what greater looks like in the kingdom. Unexpected, undeniable, and unstoppable. What's coming is wrapped in glory. It carries the fragrance of every tear you've cried, every prayer you whispered, every night you held on when you wanted to give up. And when it shows up, it won't just satisfy your heart, it will validate your warfare. It will make it clear why the enemy fought you so hard, because what God is releasing isn't just for you. It's for everyone connected to your obedience. When greater comes, it blesses your family, your community, your legacy. The recovery isn't just about returning. It's about rising. And God is not restoring you to where you were. He's lifting you to where you belong.